So this is quite a bit after the play session that I did that I said I was going to tell you guys about. The play session didn't go great. So a lot of my energy went to trying to figure out what to do with my players after some of the decisions that they made. And I wanted to have some idea of what I was going to do before I recorded it. So I think we're like a week and a half after the session that we had. So if that can give you an idea of the dilemma I faced. But before I go into what happened during the game, just to kind of talk about the technology was, for the most part, pretty good. We didn't really have any problems running the game. When we started, everybody seemed to eventually get it, I guess. We did try our best to figure out how to use my Spotify account so that the other players could hear it. And initially it sounded like it would be easier if we just used Discord for that. And I heard that you could play for other people what you were playing, but it sounds like everybody has to have a premium account for that to work, and I think only 2 of us have that, so that wasn't going to work. We didn't know that initially, so everybody was downloading Discord, making an account for those of us that didn't have one, and then we found out, in the end that it wasn't going to work. So that was really frustrating that we just couldn't have that music. I did implant some music into the pond thing, so we did have some looping music, and my players didn't really mind that it was on repeat. There was 2 songs on there, and they were gentle kind of background stuff that wasn't too sleepy sounding, I guess. So that worked out, but if we have that every week, it'll probably get pretty old. And because music is such a big file consumption, I just don't want to put more music than necessary, I guess, embedded into the program if I can find a way to play like Spotify through it. So we did end up finding after that first week how to use Spotify and how to stream it so my players can hear it for the game, but it was very complicated, and I don't know. If you are not computer savvy, I don't suggest trying to do it. Just find, a different method. We have 2 methods that we found. One, you can't use Spotify, but you can use YouTube videos, and there are great YouTube playlists that are like hours long that match a specific theme that you're looking for. So if you don't want to mess around with Spotify or trying to figure out how to get that streaming, let me see if I can pull it up. You can get Rhythm. We haven't used Rhythm again because we haven't played since the last session, but you can link specific YouTube video links into Rhythm and it will just play for all of your players. It's like, yeah. So people can also type in specific songs if they want to hear a specific song. So there are a lot of cool things that Rhythm can do, and it's pretty easy. You just link your Discord account with Rhythm after you download it, and then you get to use all of the little commands it has. So if you're not computer savvy, I suggest that's the easier way than trying to get your Spotify to work. Otherwise, Spotify, we had to download a digital chord management program. It was free, and Discord PTB. So I've got 2 Discords on my computer, and we made it so that Spotify streams is like the output device for one of the Discords. And I speak through the other Discord. So if you guys are interested, good luck. I have a roommate that did most of the work in figuring out how to make it work for me. So, but that was the technology that we faced and dealt with. It's just for a soundtrack. I know it sounds maybe a little silly. But it was, I think the music is worth it. I think that it adds enough flavor, and I think it's terrible without it. I've been in campaigns where the dungeon master didn't play any music, and as a player, I hated it. So that's why I put so much effort into trying to make that work. As far as the campaign goes, my players started here in the common room. I did end up putting like a few students in there. They didn't really talk to the students or interact with the students, which is good, because I didn't have like a specific personality for each of them. And they did decide to go up to the challenge for Professor Trelawney. She wanted all of her crystal balls cleansed. Where is that? That was this one. Here. And I had like a specific spot that they just needed to be moved to, or like something to be done with. Oh, I guess I hadn't actually decided on the clear one. I could put it in a bucket of water, I guess. But I showed them the handout here. And then they were supposed to look at this and then determine where they wanted to put it throughout the room. But my players were so disrespectful of Professor Trelawney that even Professor Trelawney could only put up with so much. Like, logically, it didn't make any sense for her to let these students continue trying to help her with this extracurricular activity and take their snotty attitudes. So my players ended up like drawing in the free, because players can use the draw tool, being like, Trelawney is dumb on the thing. And like, it was just supposed to be kind of like a humorous thing. But, you know, they're interacting with the game board that we're using. And so I had Trelawney see it, and she's like, get this graffiti off. And then after that, she was like, okay, I just need these crystal balls cleansed. Obviously in the Trelawney voice, she was like, oh, I'm, too much into the ethereal spirit to cleanse them myself. I need to stay in my head channels or something dumb like that. So she told them that she couldn't do it herself. She just needed help doing something, this like a simple thing. And that they needed to just sense where the crystal balls were supposed to go and to put them there. But again, my player's like, oh, these balls, they look like bowling balls. Maybe you should set up some pins. And then they were like, oh, this one is calling to me. It feels like it's for me. And she's like, you can't keep the crystal ball. So they were doing all sorts of weird things. And one of my characters in particular, and it's in his character, doesn't like Professor Trelawney because of her hullabaloo. So he was like, well, I'm just going to roll this thing, and I don't know, said something about dumb clairvoyance or how inaccurate it is. So she kicked him out because they just weren't early into the challenge, and they weren't being very nice about it. So Professor Trelawney is pretty dense, but not that dense. After that, they went to the pond area and kind of played around here. This area went pretty well. They did some things I definitely was not expecting. What? Okay. Oh, I see. my character that can cast like a tornado spell cast the tornado spell in the water, which pulled all of the fish out and like made them fly everywhere. Definitely not something I was expecting them to do. But I did keep some of the fish inside. I didn't make, I mean, obviously they're level 2s or second years. So the tornado can't be like super duper strong. So some of the fish would have stayed inside. So they kind of collected onto the side and they learned that the fish were cold. And after like touching the fish and like they tried to eat the berries that were also on the trees, the berries that I had designed to like feed the fish. So they were eating them and it was disgusting. Eventually they figured out that they had to feed the berries to the fish, but it was definitely interesting to see how they tried to get around all of that, like the tornado throwing the fish out and whatever. So the pool did fill back up again with water, which made them suspicious after a bit, but they were able to go into the pond and get the picture here, which I put little descriptions for. So I found pictures on the internet, just of things that kind of matched what I was kind of looking for, and then I put a fun little description that they could read and like little clues that would link the pictures together. And so that like now there's kind of a bigger mystery tied with the paintings that I hope my players kind of dive into, especially now that they've done other things we haven't gotten to yet. But so they got the picture, they saw the hole in the bottom of the lake here, but they didn't go swim down into it. It was a little bit sad that they didn't want to go exploring, but I also don't blame them because it would have been a little unwise not knowing where the tunnel leads to. So they didn't go down into the Chamber of Secrets despite the secret passage. After that, they did deliver the painting to Professor McGonagall. They made an appointment, went to go deliver it to her. And some of my players went to go turn it in. But a few of my other players specifically went over to talk with Vinda. And it was based off of something that I kind of had just thrown in there for fun to give them a few more answers or something to go off of. So my players were like, I gave them this little hint. And it's pretty cryptic, but it gives them basically the answer to the problem that they're solving, but figuring it out is tough. The tree that's linked to the sapling is that big tree in the Forbidden Forest. I want to call it a juniper tree, but it's something else. So the tree is linked to a sapling that is hidden underneath the Defense Against the Dark Arts office. You can only access it from outside, even though it's technically inside Hogwarts. It is a ritual that is incomplete, so it's imperfect. That's linking these two things. And the ritual is to create a ghost out of somebody that is already living. So it is ghosting somebody. And that somebody is the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. And it was doing it to all the Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers. So the defensive kin. So that's kind of the cryptic translation of the thing I wrote in there. I put it in there to give them another thing to think about. But the problem is they are interpreting the word ritual and ghost, and they are applying it to their Vinda excursion. The ritual for Professor Binns, because a ritual is mentioned and Professor Binns is a ghost. So they took two words out of those two things and they're applying it to this. So they went and talked to her and they're like, well, we shouldn't do this anymore. This is dangerous. This is the thing that we found. They only told her half of it. So I, of course, had to roleplay not knowing what the other half was. But she assured them, I ran this by Professor McGonagall. Well, Headmistress McGonagall. It's hard changing that. Headmistress McGonagall. And there's fail-safes for it. This is a ritual that I personally created, so nobody would be able to tamper with it. If it goes wrong, it'll just fizzle out. There's no way that even if I had unfinished it, there would really be any problems. Even if all of that weren't true, if something bad were to happen when we did this ritual, I hope that you trust me enough as your professor, and somebody that was hired specifically for solving this problem, that I would be able to handle whatever hiccups came this way. So that's kind of how I explained it, but they were having absolutely none of it. They wouldn't trust her. They wouldn't accept the fact that she's older than them, and they're second years and she's graduated, and that, Headmistress McGonagall has approved this. They just wouldn't give her the benefit of the doubt, even though she's given them the benefit of the doubt for 3 weeks now, in game. So that was really, really frustrating for me. In the end, she was like, if you guys feel like this is too dangerous, you don't have to come. And I'll do the ritual, and, that's that. And they were like, well, you just shouldn't do it. You should postpone it. Let us get more information. She's like, well, I've already prepped everything. Like, some of the materials needed for this are time sensitive, and Professor Binns isn't going to last much longer. So, like, she was trying to emphasize the fact that this needs to be done now. We can't just keep waiting. And eventually, one of the players that went to go visit her was like, okay, well, I guess we'll come with. But at this stage, as a professor, she's like, I don't want a bunch of second years that feel like this is too dangerous to come with me and ruin it. Like, what if they try to get in the way because they don't want this to go through? What if they can't fulfill their side of the deal in protecting the ritual because they're not into it? Or, something like that. So personally, again, reason tells me that the professor would be like, no, I'm just going to go find older students, or I'm going to find professors to aid me in doing this ritual. She was kind of doing it, allowing them to come along as a favor, to be honest, because they had been involved in it up to this point. But having somebody more experienced obviously would be a much better choice. But this was it was such an important part of solving the problems. Like, after this was all finished, they were going to see that the owl was carrying Professor Binns' essence along with the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher's essence off into the Forbidden Forest to that tree. Like, this was going to give them the answer where to go to finish the storyline. And now it doesn't make any sense for them to go. Unless unless I remove my logic from it, which I feel like I really don't want to. And yeah. We're also having some chat problems. So, like, my two players were trying to talk to one another. And just ask, like, what should we do to stop her? So one of them is like, should we drug her in some way just to make her not want to go, or make her drowsy so she can't? They were going so far as thinking about drugging a teacher, which obviously that would be expulsion, in my opinion. So that's like the extent of how bad this was going. They were trying to make it so that I couldn't read their responses, but I would have had to roleplay it anyway, so they were going to have to tell me if they had decided to do it or not. But that was a problem with how we were whispering each other. You have to whisper each other's, like, names right below their portrait, not their character names necessarily, so we kind of discovered that was the issue between talking so nobody could see. So yeah, that's my dilemma. My current solution, though it took me a really long time to get there and I had to talk with people to get advice on it, that wasn't obviously in the game. They plan on sneaking out. I know they plan on sneaking out, even though they are no longer invited to this ritual. Which means that they're going to have to use the secret passage from their common room right here, and they're going to have to go up to the ballroom because their portrait hole is now sealed because they've gone out too many times. They've broken curfew too many times. And now that they don't have a professor coming to pick them up, they're going to have to use this to get over here. Now, from here, I presume that they will probably use the other secret passage that is in the ballroom, which leads them to the library. Okay. So yeah, here. But from here, they still have to get to the History of Magic corridor, which is on the second floor here. So trying to find a secret passage that leads them directly here is going to be pretty tough, to be honest. So they're going to have to be out in the open and walking around. Now, again, I think logically that there would be more, security, school security, during a time when there's going to be a ritual and they know that the ghosts might be disturbed. Again, that was part of the whole encounter thing, that the ghosts might be disturbed, so they're going to have to defend the ritual. Because the students aren't going to be out and they don't want other students to get harmed, they'd probably up security in some way. So then if they're sneaking around after curfew to get to the ritual, what kind of security do they run into, and what happens if they get caught? And do I want them to make it? Because this is such a big part of the story. The thought was that they would eventually be able to reach the ritual in whatever path they chose, but they would run into the encounters that I had set up, the waves, essentially, as they went. So I could still use the thing I spent hours making. So they would still be able to run into these while they were attempting to get to the ritual, but the ritual would be finished when they actually arrived, and then they would see, I guess, kind of the tail end of the owl flying away and witness that. But they would not be able to pursue the owl like they normally would have because the teacher will escort them back to their room and they would get punished. So draining all of their house points, as it were. So they're going to be punished either way, but I had to figure out how to make it so that they could at least stay involved in the story. I really actually just wanted to stop and be like, you know, they solved the entire Dungeons and Dragons for you. All of the NPCs did all the work and you don't get to do it because of the choices that you made and the fact that you didn't trust any of my NPCs. But that wouldn't be very fun. So you gotta cancel your pride sometimes, I guess. But that's how the experience went. That's kind of the solution I've come into. I haven't worked out a lot of the details yet because this obviously wouldn't be school security. This would be like a response to the ritual happening. But so I still have some things to work out, but we can't play for a while again because work and the hours that we have are preventing it quite a bit. So hopefully that changes once we get more people back at the workplace. But yeah, that's how it is, and that's the dilemmas I face. And we will get back either when I'm planning again to try to solve the problem or when we play again.